you want to save money on your trading card purchases, we have a promo link over at 50cards.shop. Enter the promo code ATNIGHT to get 5% off your order. Hey everybody, welcome to Vita Premium Transitions, the show where we show you a deck in V, how to turn it into premium, and today I have OuterOrange back with me. How are you?
Yay, I'm good. A little sick, but I'm good. I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
I mean, you did great on the Grand Blue episode, and today we're doing a clan I have zero interest or understanding in, and that's Bermuda Triangle.
Yay!
Which is I probably should, just because they always get broken stuff.
It's more just a combination of things that become broken.
I think it's because, like, for a long time, they would get their support at the end of, like, a cycle of whatever Bushiroad was doing, so they're like, alright, we're gonna move on to something else, might as well make it big, and then...
Yeah, I think part of it is just because the clan doesn't have an identity, so they just get a bunch of random stuff together, and then when you have something like that, having all these different accesses to a lot of random stuff, you can create something very strong, which we'll be seeing that today, actually, so...
Yeah, so why don't we start off with the V list here?
Yeah, sure.
What do we got going on?
Alright, so on the V list here, so I kept this really, really basic. For those of you guys that play V or know V at all, this is a Orange Bermuda Triangle list, and the way this works is that you pretty much just call a whole board out, and then you use your skill to bounce it all back, and then get a bunch of advantage with force markers, on top of also calling a card from your deck. I don't know if I can show. Yeah, I can. Yeah. She also calls a card from your deck, so ideally the whole deck is built around her, and you want your entire engine to work around her in V. And like I said, I got it pretty simple. You can go a little crazy with like toolboxing, since she can tutor out any card from deck. But ideally, you just play her, and then you have your restanding rear guards, and then you have a bunch of on-place ability cards like Aqua
and her really creepy webbed hands. Aqua always freaked me out.
Oh yeah, she does have the web hand.
Or they're like, look at my hand, it's webbed and creepy. Ugh.
Yeah, she's like what is she? I'm trying to think of like what the fish she is, but it's not coming to me right now. But she's this particular fish. That's why she's like that. Yeah, I think she's like supposed to be a specific fish. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like a form of a jellyfish. But anyway, but yeah, pretty much you're just running a bunch of like cards that have a bunch of good off-place abilities or help you with some kind of shield, like Ellie. There's a new addition actually, which is this card right here. This is the new promo, Prism of the Water. I always say her name wrong, but I think it's Martola, but I always say it wrong. But this is Martola. This kind of increased the ceiling of this deck and actually made this deck very popular. It's also pretty cheap to build, so that's why I decided to pick this deck specifically, because this is not an expensive build over on the English side. So, but yeah, long story short, you call a bunch of stuff, you bounce it all back, and then you call it back out again. And with this card adding on to that effect, she lets you on place draw a card, call another card, so you can kind of extend attacks on just swing. So it just adds like a bunch of like cool stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I am definitely going to be taking the back seat on this one.
Yeah, you're good. If you have any questions, like, I mean, you can, or anything that will help. I don't know.
I mean, I know for, like, Bermuda Triangle, when it first came out, like, way back in the day, it originally started with, okay, we're about bouncing things to our hand. Yep. And then over time, it's just kind of, they've done different archetypes or stuff like that, where it's morphed and changed, and I think over time it just basically became mermaid-shaped paladins at a certain point. Like, you know, make a board, make it strong, call more of them.
Yeah, kinda. Yeah, luckily enough, this deck's a little bit more at home. It is a bouncing deck, so I think this is more traditional, more Bermuda traditional. And there isn't anything like too insane happening here. You're just calling, swinging with your rear guard, swing with Van, and calling another card out. But now, as I mentioned, with this new promo, you can actually get 2 to 3 cards out. Before, it used to be like just 1, which would be like whatever this card would call you out, which is Orange. But overall, this is actually a very strong deck. It is very free. This is actually probably one of the strongest decks in V right now. A lot of people are like, Maidens! I actually think this deck is maybe not this exact variation. I actually go a little bit more Highlander with my builds personally, but this deck is actually very up there on the scale of like what deck to take if you want to compete. This is one of the cheapest and easiest decks to take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like if Bushiroad decides to like completely like steamroll Steam maidens now that Worlds is over.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see, and I know for pun not intended. I know for Bermuda Triangle, there are so many strategies that you can take with it, and I don't really have anything else to say. So
yeah, I mean, I'm just like super generic too. So that's another reason why I don't know if you haven't noticed, but this deck keeps coming back. We've had like all these different metas, and in between all of them, Anj has been like kind of like going like this in between all of them. And the reason being is that this deck is so generic. Like you can literally run anything you want in this deck, and it'll still function just because of how the deck works. Because it's all circle around Anj. She only bounces normal units, but doesn't say what kind. Doesn't have any archetype. It doesn't matter as long as you can bounce it. You're good to go. So because of that, that's why this deck keeps coming back. It's just so generic. Like Prism was even very restricted to being Prism units and all that stuff. But this entire deck has none of that. So you can sit here and run like all one-ofs if you wanted, and the deck will still work. Like that's the craziest part.
Yeah, and also just for people watching, if you want to take a closer look at the deck, I'll have the Decklog codes in the description, so you can go look for yourself.
Yay!
But yeah, why don't we go look at the premium one, because this gets
pretty
nuts.
crazy.
Yeah.
So something I want to mention before we switch over to the premium one, if you really wanted to, you can take this exact deck right here that you see in front of you, add 16 G zone cards to it, and you would actually have like pretty much a premium deck. You actually don't need to go that far and extreme as I went with the list I'll be showing you, but I just want to showcase that you can actually take, if you're out there with an Anj list already, you can take that exact list that you have there, get the 16 G zone cards that I'll probably showcase here, and you can just stop there and play premium. I want that to be known. You don't have to go like with all the crazy stuff, but anyway, I'll show the other stuff here. But this is a little bit of a crazier list, but I just wanted to emphasize that like you don't need to go like this far to play premium Anj is the best way to put it. I went more. Oh, sorry.
Well, just because like the point of this series was to show that like a lot of decks are that pretty much. You take the V deck, slap a G zone on it, and you're done.
And you can definitely do that with Anj, actually.
Probably the best example of it, I think.
Yes, exactly. It really is. I went a little further. The reason being is there's one card that's unbanned in Premium, and that is Q-Tire, which is this card right here. And actually, because of that is the reason why you can go a little bit more crazy in Premium. This card used to be unrestricted in V, but then they restricted it because you can toot out any card that you want. So long story short, as I mentioned before with Anj, you can grab any single card from your deck and pretty much put it on the board, right? So that's why over here you'll notice we have a lot of different one-ofs because the deck can get those one-ofs. And this deck pretty much does the exact same stuff that V Anj does, but there's one difference. It doesn't matter about any of these cards. We can ignore all these cards. The difference is this card right here, Heltrada. The card I revealed, by the way. This is the reason why Anj works really well with this card as well. So this card pretty much on attack, you can do some stuff, and then you restand your Vanguard at the end of her battle. So what happens is you go from this card into Anj into another attack. So this extends so far out. So Heltrada bounces cards, and then Anj bounces cards, and then she also calls cards out. So essentially you go from like a 2-card hand to like a 16-card hand in the course of like 1 turn. It's pretty insane, and that's why a lot of people that tend to build in Bermuda Triangle, they tend to build more Highlander, or if they build like something like this, they'll build more one-ofs because you can get away with it, and that's sort of why I have it here. I actually had like a pure list, and as I kept like going through, I was like, man, Q-Tire is just too strong. This card's just too strong. So, but like I said, you don't have to go this crazy. I'm showing this because I think it's super fun to play this deck like this, and I feel like it's just way more interactive and enjoyable like this than it is like in the V end, where it's just like, here's the 4-Os of everything, and you just kind of play it. It's a little bit more dull, so that's why I am showing the more interesting side. Also, as I mentioned, as we kind of talked about this, there's D cards and G cards and V cards in here, which is like a good thing and a bad thing. Kind of have like a little bit of a Ferris wheel of everything. And yeah, I don't know if I should go into detail about every single card here. They're kind of, some of them are kind of like self-explanatory, but some are a little bit more complicated. But just to give you brief understandings, there's a bunch of off places. You'll notice some cards that we've already seen, like cards like these. We saw these over on the B side. This is Aqua, and then we have Lieselot, Syria that I showed. Q-Tire might be a little bit more newer to some folks, especially since people may or may not know that she's banned. Pretty much you can declare a card, and you can keep revealing until you see that declare card, and you can put it to your hand. However, if you see a second copy copy of a different card, you have to stop what you're doing and shuffle. So essentially, you have to play like a more Highlander-esque build. We still have Tira. Tira is still restander, still really good stuff. There's some sorry, I can't talk. Other goofy stuff in here, like this card right here. This helps you G guard, which is these cards down here that give you access to G guarding. You can actually grab her off of Q-Tire. You can grab any of these cards actually off of Q-Tire, which is what makes this deck so interesting, as you can keep spamming this card, and then you can just keep grabbing all your other cards and deck thinning until all you have is triggers in your deck. And that's pretty much like the main bulk of sort of what this version does. There's a couple little extra tweaks. We have like a Hanali here just for opponents in case they multi-attack a lot. You can run this card to kind of help yourself out. You can also grab this with Q-Tire. There's this card right here, which is to some people may be familiar, to some maybe not. This is Reese's. She says when she's placed, you can give something 10k. You can apply that to your Vanguard, which you can also do on your opponent's attacking you, so just a little extra love there. And then here's a card that some Youthberg players might be familiar with. When you discard this card, you can still have to call her out to an open rearguard circle. This is super important, as a lot of some of the cards in the deck and in the stride zone discard a lot, so you can get free cards to the board and then bounce those cards back and then recall them back out again. So just a lot of plussing.
For in the case of like Hanali and the girl that gives your Vanguard 10k, you guys have G guards that allow you to play like call stuff to board. Okay, during the opponent's
that's why.
turn.
During your opponent's turn, you can call Hanali. You can call this card, by the way, Martola, again, going back to this crazy card. You can actually call this, force your opponent to... both you and your opponent have to call. So while your opponent's attacking, you can actually slam this card down and force them to have to call over their own cards. So that's also interesting.
Depending on the deck. I know for people who see Hanali pop up a lot in this series, what it used to be was you would just stick it like in the back row behind your Vanguard, and that was usually good enough to prevent the opponent from multi-attacking. But a lot of clans have, mid-battle phase removal or just get rid of it in main phase. So the decks that can call it to the board on the opponent's turn as like a way of stemming their battle phase have a better, use of it than something that's just going to be like, all right, I'll just call it back here and go ahead,
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a good point you bring up, because it actually shows kind of difference between like which clans are kind of stronger than others almost, because some clans have access to stuff like that. If you can call Hanali and stop your opponent from doing stuff, that's cool and all, but if your opponent retires it, it's not really doing much. But calling mid-battle is just so huge, and only a few clans have access to that. One of them is Bermuda, another one is Grand Blue. Great Nature can do it as well, actually.
All Mirage, baby!
So, yep, exactly. And Jet can kind of do it with some weird stuff in Year Chronicle, or they can spin stuff back and then call stuff over and do all this fun and funky stuff. But yeah, it really shows a clan's strength that they have access to that kind of stuff, in my opinion. Because it's just you're stopping your opponent from playing the game. Like if you face decks like Pale Moon, they're big multi-attacking decks, right? But if you have Hanali, they really don't have too much that can stop it. They have like a couple techs, but it's nothing crazy.
And then another thing I've noticed is that in this build there's no Rollick, and that's because the deck can just ride up and do what it wants to do anyway, right?
Yeah, it can. Honestly, I actually think Rollick is pretty good in this deck. It's actually something I didn't really consider when I was building this. So it's just a little fun fact. I built this deck for fun because everyone's playing pure Bermuda Highlander right now, right? With the reindeer and all this stuff. And I was like, what if I just took all that and put it in Ange? Just for funsies. And I found out that the deck is actually really fun to play. It's not as good, but it's just so fun. Like, this deck feels so like watching your opponent just sheer eyes go like this when they realize you have a 22 card hand is just hilarious to me, and that's something that Highlander can't achieve as well as this deck can.
I think also it's an easier way to transition because Ange being used in this build, like you can just have your, like you said, just take the deck, slap a G zone on it.
Yep, exactly.
It's all good, baby.
This deck does not need much to make it work. If you want to optimize it, it's a whole other story. But to make the deck function, you really just need this Vanguard and this Stride. That's all you really need. As long as you have those two things, the deck will function on its own. And like normal ratios, so play like 4 grade ones. But yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into all this stuff right here. Like I said, you can kind of do whatever you want with it. That's why I'm giving you guys a Highlander list that I've been having fun with, but you can also just go completely pure. But going to the G zone here, because somebody revealed 2 of these cards. Sorry.
We've been trying to lobby Bushiro to let us reveal either Great Nature or OTT. We haven't heard, so
I don't know. To
What
be
are you
honest, I
gonna
don't control the strings.
I know!
Well, anyway, so in the G zone, as I mentioned, if you already have a deck, you can just take this exact G zone, just slap it on your deck. Like this one right here, you can move some stuff around, but honestly, like you can even take some of these older cards, take those out, run like more Heltruda and T-Ray. You don't need much to make the G zone work. But just to kind of break it down a little bit, this is the Crease. This is the new G guard that recently came out, and pretty much she says counterblast, returning normal units to your hand to perform one of the actions. You can give, if it's a 2 or less, you can give 15k for shield for the battle, and then if it's a grade 3 or more, you give your Vanguard 5k permanently for the rest of the turn, which is actually really huge. Kind of similar to how earlier I said you can buff up your Vanguard. This is another card that you can buff up your Vanguard with. By the way, you can grab grade 3s, which you can grab Q-Tire, you get Tira, you can grab a copy of Ange, you can grab some really funky stuff in there that will help you then to replace them back down on the board and do funny stuff. It also protects your Q-Tire. Before, when you have Q-Tire on the board, if she gets sniped, but now you can actually grab her back to hand, and that's actually a very huge thing. Something in Highlander people talk about a lot, how crazy it is they can just pick up Q-Tire. So
you can also, if you called your Heal Guardian to give yourself damage to play with, and then bounce it back to your hand, and then you have another.
This one's normal unit only, sadly.
Oh, normal unit.
But there might be some kind of other synergy somewhere. But yeah, Heltruda can actually bounce her back. So something. So you bring up a good point. So Heltruda says when she attacks, you discard 3 cards and you return all cards on the circles. So yeah, it's mandatory. You have to return everything on the circles. That includes lock cards. That includes everything. So you return everything, and then you have to call 2 cards. Oh no, it says choose up to. So you can call up to 2 cards, and then at the end of her battle, you can have a Sopas restand the Vanguard. So essentially, by the way, this opens up so many plays, not just Ange. She restands the Vanguard, so any Vanguard that you have underneath her, you can just play that. So, like, you can make a whole deck around it and then ride Heltruda, and then you'll go back down to your Vanguard, which is just a really nice mechanic to do. Like, it just opens up so many builds and everything. The only thing that's really painful is the 3-card discard. That's actually why I was talking about Justine earlier. Justine comes back out by herself off the discard, so it's just very useful. But this is such a generic card that you can run so many different Bermuda builds. You can take like almost any of your V decks and pretty much just add this card to your G zone that you instantly can play it. It's just crazy. You can do the same thing in D, by the way. You can make a Kyrie deck and do the same thing. You can take a Kyrie build and just slap this on top, because Kyrie on attack also bounces cards, and then just, bring it all back out. Just all these little things you can do with just this card existing in Bermuda Triangle is insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a that thing is the equivalent of Brand Blue's boat.
Yeah, Bad Bounty. It's like slightly worse but better Bad Bounty in like different ways, however you want to look at it. Bad Bounty is good because you discard after you do your drive checks. This card sucks because you have to discard before you do drive checks, which does hurt. It does, because you're discarding cards that you don't usually want to discard, and sometimes you just don't have the hand. Sometimes if say your opponent like almost tried to murder you or something, and you're sitting there with like 2 cards in your hand, it's like, oh, I can't go into Heltruda. So it does happen.
Yeah, for strides like that where you were discarding 3, you at the very least had your triple drive that you could then throw away.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So.
But in this case, you don't have the triple drive, so you have to hope that you have 3 cards in hand, which, by the way, can bite you sometimes. I've been in situations where I'm like, I'm gonna stride Heltruda. I'm like, oh wait, I have 2 cards. Oh, yeah. I can't do anything.
I know, Megiddo shows up here again after the Grand Blue episode and the Aquaforce episode.
Yeah, he's back.
It's a very good Zeroth dragon. Like,
it is.
For a lot of the clans, most of them you can get along without. I think Bermuda Triangle is the one that probably has the doesn't really need it, as opposed to like Aquaforce. Aquaforce has a much better use for something like this. A, because they're an Excel clan, and B, because they're usually like on a thinner margin when it comes to card advantage. So using this can then call a new board and then mess around with it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've actually never seen Aquaforce go into Megiddo ever in my life, but now that I think about it, no, I've never. I don't think now think about it. I think I've ever faced an Aquaforce player in Premium competitively yet. Like, I just haven't bumped into one. So.
You've never run into Commander Jaime.
No, I really haven't. We've never played. We haven't played a single game yet. But now that you mention it, you have the Excel markers. You can call cards there, and then just counterblast 2. Just call a whole board, and then they all like cycle back with each other and move each other around. And yeah, I can definitely see that. In here, it's definitely not the strongest in here, but sometimes it's just fun to just call Q-Tire 100 times, so you can just do that.
Yeah.
And they all attack and stuff like that. There's actually a mini Megiddo already in Bermuda Triangle. It's called Pacifica. Pacifica has a stride that actually has a mini Megiddo turn. It literally says, attack with all your rear guards, and then on her swing, call 5 Pacificas, and they can all attack. So it's literally just mini Megiddo is what I call it. Yeah. It also gives like 5k to them and everything. It's just baby Megiddo. But anyway, in here you just kind of run it like as like another approach to a finisher. You don't really need it. You can probably get away without it, but it does come up. Like it's pretty useful. But going in, we got Tira. This is a very, very popular stride in Bermuda Triangle. Back when Tira didn't exist, this was probably the best going first stride, I guess is the best way to call it. Pretty much for every open rearguard circle, she gets 5k power, so she's a huge, huge wall. If you just want to just take the whole Vanguard, just swing at your opponent. And then she also restands at GB3. So if you can like send back 3 cards, it could be any 3 rear guards, and then if you send back 3, she restands and loses some drives. She's really good in like Revere decks and stuff like that. That's kind of where she shines the most because Revere recalls cards back out, so you kind of just have like multi-attacking under 2 Vanguard swings happening. She used to be even stronger back when we had other stuff unrestricted, but sadly some stuff got restricted, so she's just way worse now. But sometimes because she has no cost on her, like there's nothing on her that says Soul Blast, Counter Blast, anything, so that sometimes she's just good to go into just because there's no cost behind her. So very little funny G-Guard, not G-Guard, stride. And then we actually, speaking of G-Guards, we have the Citron. This is what you mentioned earlier about calling cards mid-battle. So this card lets you do that. You could pretty much call a Grade 1 or greater from your hand to the board, and if you call something, she gets 10k shield. So you can G-Guard into this, so you can call Q-Tire if you want, you can call Aqua, call Weasel, call Moitra or Materia. You can call like a bunch of, there's so many cards. The card pool got bigger too. Like there's Syria. There's so many good cards. Honolulu. There's a lot. There's a lot of good options. And in case you feel like you might lose that thing you called, it's okay. That's why we run a Dismal to kind of save that from happening. Yeah, that's actually why I run this.
I think Dismal is again one of those cards where if you're getting into premium, it's probably a good thing to pick up just to have. Along with like Rollick and Honolulu and all them. But So
we have the one Dismal in here for that. I've had situations where I didn't run the Dismal and then I call something out and then I put retires. I'm like, oh man, and I just with the Dismal and I was like, all right, this stays. So that's what Dismal does. Dismal just gives like pretty much that unit cannot be hit and cannot be chosen by effects. So you can call Hanoi and then Dismal it instantly if you have 2 G guards, which you will in this deck because you search for them. It's pretty nuts. So you can just do that. You can just Q-Tire into like one of these and then have another one of these and just kind of pop off and have a party with your G guards. It's great. Next, I run this one funny card, which is Frederica. This is my funny card. So this card pretty much says on place you reveal top 10 of your cards. If they're all different, they have to all be different, including triggers. You can call up to 5 mermaid cards from your G zone to the board, and they all get plus 15k power. So you call 5 of any of these that isn't the Cray Elementals, which is just a funny little thing you can do. It's a good finisher move if you have like no cards in, like if you have like barely any cards in your hand. You can go into this. It's free again, like no cost on it, and it's a pretty much like you have the 30k strides attacking. Another kind of, I like to call another mini Megiddo turn because your back row attacks too. So you can attack with your back row, then attack with Van, and then attack with your front row. And they're all swinging for 30. So just some funny stuff that you can do with this card. But it can miss though because unlike normal Highlander, it only counts normal units. This counts everything. This includes your trigger names. So if you check 2 of these or something, that's it. Like you have to stop. So that's the downside to it. But because this deck decked in so much, chances are you'll probably hit. So very, very funny little card. And then Sandy is this big shield girl. Pretty much she gives 5k for every 2 cards in your hand. You can catalyze for additional 5k. It's just a big brick of shield. She also flips something, which is good. Sometimes you want like just more flipping for GBs. I also run one Stride Orange. This is against Link Joker matchups. So a lot of people may not know how Link Joker matchups work. They're usually pretty brutal, but Bermuda Triangle actually has one of the freest accesses to deal with Link Joker. So Link Joker tends to lock your board and do all the stupid stuff. You ride into this, or you go into this card and instantly you just don't care anymore because this unlocks pretty much your whole board. The way it's worded is that you bounce your circles. Because you bounce your circles, it goes around blocking.
So like if something mentions cards or like things on that circle or whatever, something like that, that will get around locked cards. Pale Moon has an example of this where Masquerade Master Harry pulls 2 cards into Soul, not 2 rear guards, and then calls 3 things. So you can pull lock cards in.
Yeah, which helps a lot. And then they had that band.
Well, that's if you run Nightmare Doll Alice. If you're watching, this is going to come out after the Pale Moon episode. If you watch the Pale Moon episode with She Devil Gaming, you can run Master Harry. Or just like, I know that with all the new stuff in Overdress, Luthier and Silverthorns is having a big moment right now. So you can run Silverthorn and get around it.
You could. Yeah, but just a little funky stuff. Yeah. This is just a bunch of bouncing. It's mainly for the Link Joker matchup. You almost never want to go into this normally. I run Olivia. A lot of people don't run this card. I actually love this card to death. Pretty much what
free crit.
Yeah, exactly. It's pressure. There's none of these have pressure except for this card, in my opinion. So pretty much you swing with your rears and you swing with her and you bounce your whole board and then call 2 cards, which is just really nice. And then she also gets a crit on top of that. The only thing is you have to have different card name units, but you'll have them. It's even in the normal deck you'll have them. It's actually very easy to not miss this condition. Then this is another card where you can pick a card up from your board and then guard with it, and if you guard the same card, she gets 5k power. So just nice little extra shield you can have, and then we talked about the Dismal. That's pretty much the G zone. This is a pretty basic G zone aside from the Federica. People don't run Federica or Olivia too often, and they just up the other stuff pretty much. But I like to be experimental, and I just like to throw stuff in. I always like having access to anything possible, so I'll always like to have as much as I can in the G zone. I don't want to just have like the 3 of Heltruda if I could just have 2 and have something else, because how often are you going to stride Heltruda 3 times? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, so. Strides don't usually go on besides the second one, unless it's this weird like grind game that's been going on. But
yeah, which we're definitely not in meta right now, but that's okay. Right now we don't even know what the G deck is. It doesn't exist at the moment.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
I know. Oh yeah, because this comes out the day after they're like, hey, we're gonna redo a bunch of older cards, and we're like, sorry, what was that? Yeah, so
pretty exciting. I hope they also give out a good ban list or fix the ride down stuff we have going on right now. That would be really nice. Right. Because right now the G deck doesn't exist in meta. Yeah. In the competitive scene, this right here is just this. It's just V. Yeah. It's just V. I've been testing so much recently after being away from the premium scene for a while, and I'm like, yeah, you really don't stride. You just don't stride. It never. If you're playing the three meta decks, you never stride.
Yeah, well, yeah,
because pretty wild.
It's got the write down thing, or you're playing a deck that can, if going against write down, has a turn 3, which not a lot of decks do.
Yeah, you need something to either have to have the sustain to deal with your opponent striding and not dying to it, because the strides are just so big right now, or you have to play the ride down game and just outgrind your opponent until you're at like 5 damage. Yeah, exactly. It's really harsh right now. It's fun. I actually like it. At first I was like, this is so weird. I was like, it's kind of fun. Grade 2 gaming. Let's go.
This isn't the time. I'll talk about it off mic. Anyway.
Oh, sorry.
It's not your fault. So yeah, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks OuterOrange for coming on. A link to her much more successful channel will be in the description below.
You said this last time.
What? It's true. Yeah, thanks everybody for watching. At Nexus at Night on Twitter, patreon.com/Nexus at Night, all that good stuff. Leave a like, leave a comment. We'll see you next time.
Bye.